In 480 BC, 300 Spartan warriors stood at a narrow mountain pass called Thermopylae, facing the largest army the ancient world had ever seen. Over 100,000 Persian soldiers, led by King Xerxes, were marching to conquer Greece. For 3 days, these 300 men, along with a few thousand Greek allies, held back the entire Persian Empire. This is the story of how they fought, how they died, and how their sacrifice saved Western civilization. This is the Battle of Thermopylae. In 480 BC, the Persian Empire was the world's superpower. King Xerxes ruled an empire that stretched from India to Egypt, controlling nearly half the world's population. His father, Darius, had tried to conquer Greece 10 years earlier, but was defeated at the Battle of Marathon. Now Xerxes wanted revenge. He spent 4 years preparing the largest invasion force ever assembled. Ancient sources claim over 2 million soldiers, but modern historians estimate at least 150,000 troops, plus hundreds of warships. This was an unstoppable force that had crushed every nation in its path. As the Persian army marched toward Greece in the spring of 480 BC, city after city surrendered without a fight. The Greeks were terrified. Their cities were small and constantly fighting each other. How could they possibly stop the mighty Persian Empire? But 2 cities refused to surrender: Athens and Sparta. The Greeks needed a plan. They couldn't fight the Persians in open battle. They were vastly outnumbered. But Greece's mountainous terrain offered a solution. If they could hold a narrow pass, they could delay the Persians and buy time to evacuate Athens and gather their forces. That narrow pass was Thermopylae. To understand this battle, you need to understand the Spartans. Sparta wasn't just another Greek city. It was a warrior society unlike anything the world had seen. From age 7, Spartan boys entered brutal military training called the agoge. They lived in barracks, were given minimal food, and were trained to endure pain without showing emotion. They learned to fight in the phalanx formation, a wall of overlapping shields and spears that was nearly unbeatable in close combat. By age 20, they became full Spartan warriors, the finest heavy infantry in the ancient world. Every Spartan citizen was a professional soldier. While other Greeks were farmers and merchants who fought part-time, Spartans trained for war every single day of their lives. Their equipment was designed for one thing: killing in formation. Each Spartan carried a large bronze shield called a hoplon, a 7-foot spear called a dory, and a short sword as backup. They wore bronze armor and the distinctive red cloak that marked them as Spartans. But equipment wasn't what made them special. It was their training, discipline, and absolute refusal to retreat or surrender. Spartan mothers told their sons, "Come back with your shield or on it," meaning return victorious or return dead. Surrender was not an option. When news came that Xerxes was approaching, Sparta's king Leonidas wanted to march with the entire Spartan army, but religious festivals prevented a full mobilization. So Leonidas made a decision that would echo through history. He would take his personal bodyguard, 300 elite warriors, and march to Thermopylae immediately. He specifically chose men who had sons, so their bloodlines would continue if they died. These 300 warriors knew they were marching to their deaths, but they went anyway because that's what Spartans did. Thermopylae, meaning hot gates, was a narrow coastal pass between the mountains and the sea. At its narrowest point, it was only about 50 feet wide, so narrow that a small force could hold it against the much larger army. Leonidas and his 300 Spartans marched north, and along the way, other Greek cities contributed troops. About 7,000 Greek soldiers gathered at Thermopylae, including 1,000 from other parts of the Peloponnese, 400 Thebans, and 700 from the small city of Thespiae. The Greeks found an old defensive wall in the pass and quickly repaired it. They positioned themselves at the narrowest point and waited for the Persians to arrive. When the massive Persian army appeared on the horizon, the Greeks must have felt their hearts sink. The Persians covered the plains like a dark cloud. Their numbers seemed endless. Xerxes sent scouts to observe the Greek position. The scouts returned with a strange report. The Spartans were exercising and combing their long hair, seemingly unconcerned about the approaching army. Xerxes summoned Demaratus, an exiled Spartan king who now advised him. "What does this mean?" Xerxes asked. Demaratus explained, "This is the Spartan custom before battle. They prepare their bodies and groom themselves, for they believe a warrior should look his best when facing death. These men will never surrender. They will fight until they are all dead." Xerxes didn't believe it. He decided to wait 4 days, thinking the Greeks would retreat once they realized the hopelessness of their situation. But the Greeks didn't retreat. Finally, Xerxes sent a message: "Surrender your weapons." Leonidas sent back 2 words that would become legendary: "Molon labe," come and take them. On the 5th day after arriving at Thermopylae, Xerxes ran out of patience. He ordered his troops to attack and destroy the Greeks. The first wave of Persian soldiers, Medes and Scythians, advanced confidently into the pass. They expected an easy victory. After all, they outnumbered the Greeks at least 20-1. But as they pushed into the narrow ground, they discovered the Greek strategy. The narrow pass meant only a few dozen soldiers could fight at the front at any given time. The Persians couldn't use their superior numbers. They couldn't flank the Greeks. They had to attack straight into the Greek phalanx. And the Greek phalanx was a terrifying thing to face. Imagine a solid wall of bronze shields, each 3 feet across, overlapping so there were no gaps. Behind the shields, 7-foot spears projected forward, creating a fence of sharp bronze points. The Spartans stood in ranks 8 men deep, the warriors in back pushing forward, giving weight and power to the formation. When the Persians rushed forward, they found themselves facing spears that were longer than their own weapons. They couldn't get close enough to strike without being impaled. Their lighter armor and wicker shields couldn't stand up to Greek bronze. As they pressed forward, they were simply cut down. Wave after wave of Persian soldiers attacked. Wave after wave fell to Spartan spears. The narrow pass became a killing ground. Bodies piled up. Blood made the ground slippery. The Persians who survived the spears found themselves trapped, pushed from behind by their own soldiers, unable to advance or retreat. The Spartans fought with mechanical efficiency. When a spear broke, the warrior immediately drew his sword and continued fighting. When a man fell, another stepped forward to take his place. The phalanx never broke. Xerxes, watching from a nearby hill, was horrified. According to Herodotus, he leapt from his throne 3 times in fury as he watched his army being slaughtered. By nightfall of the first day, hundreds of Persian soldiers lay dead. The Greeks had suffered minimal casualties. The mighty Persian army had been stopped cold by a handful of Greeks in a narrow pass. The next day, Xerxes was determined to break through. This time, he would send his best troops, the Immortals. The Immortals were the Persian elite, the king's personal guard of 10,000 warriors. They were called Immortals because whenever one died or was injured, he was immediately replaced, keeping their number eternally at 10,000. These were the finest soldiers in the ancient world, veterans who had never been defeated. Led by their commander Hydarnes, the Immortals marched into the pass with absolute confidence. These warriors had conquered nations. Surely they could defeat a few hundred Greeks. But they found the same problem as the soldiers before them. The narrow pass negated all their advantages. Their superior numbers meant nothing when only a few could fight at once. Their arrows were useless in close quarters. Their shorter spears couldn't reach past the Greek shields. The Spartans used a clever tactic. They would pretend to retreat in disorder, drawing the Persians forward in pursuit. The Persians, thinking the Greeks were breaking, would rush after them and abandon their formation. Then, suddenly, the Spartans would turn, reform their phalanx, and attack the now disorganized Persians. The slaughter was immense. Even the legendary Immortals couldn't break the Greek line. By the end of the second day, they had been repulsed with heavy losses. Xerxes was in an impossible position. His army was being humiliated by a tiny force that should have been crushed in an hour. His best troops had failed. Time was running out.
His massive army required enormous supplies, and every day at Thermopylae drained his resources. The situation seemed hopeless for the Persians. Then came the betrayal that would change everything. A local Greek named Ephialtes came to Xerxes with an offer. For a reward, he would show the Persians a secret mountain path that led around Thermopylae and came out behind the Greek position. The Greeks knew about this path, the Oenopian path, and had stationed 1,000 Phocian soldiers to guard it. But Ephialtes knew exactly where it was and how to reach it in the darkness. Xerxes was overjoyed. He immediately sent Hydarnes with the Immortals to climb the mountain path under cover of night.
If they could get behind the Greeks by dawn, the defenders would be trapped and destroyed. That night, the Immortals climbed through the darkness. The Phocian guards, supposed to be watching the path, were not vigilant. When they finally heard the sound of thousands of feet rustling through fallen leaves, it was too late. The Phocians grabbed their weapons and formed up, but the Immortals simply showered them with arrows and then bypassed them. Their mission wasn't to fight the Phocians, it was to get behind the Greeks at Thermopylae. As dawn broke on the third day, Greek scouts came running to Leonidas with terrible news. The Persians had found the mountain path. They were coming from behind. The trap was closing. Leonidas called a council of the Greek commanders. The situation was clear. They were about to be surrounded. Most of the Greek forces could still escape if they left immediately, but someone had to stay and hold the pass long enough for them to get away. Leonidas made his decision. He ordered most of the Greek allies to retreat south and help defend the rest of Greece. Their mission at Thermopylae was over. There was no shame in leaving. They were needed elsewhere. But the 300 Spartans would stay. They had come to Thermopylae to buy time for Greece, and they would stay until the end. With them remained the 700 Thespians, who refused to leave their Spartan brothers, and 400 Thebans. About 1,400 men stayed to face the entire Persian army, knowing they would not survive the day. According to Herodotus, the Greeks ate their morning meal knowing it would be their last. One soldier said, "Good, then we will dine in Hades tonight." Another, warned that the Persian arrows were so numerous they would block out the sun, replied, "Good, then we will fight in the shade." This was the Spartan way, defiant humor in the face of certain death. As the morning progressed, Xerxes prepared his final assault. He waited until the Immortals completed their mountain descent and were in position behind the Greeks. Then he ordered the attack from both sides. But the Spartans didn't wait behind their wall this time. They knew they were going to die, so they decided to take as many Persians with them as possible. Led by Leonidas, they advanced into the wider part of the pass, where they would have more room to fight. The battle that followed was chaos and carnage beyond description. The Spartans fought with a fury born of desperation. They knew every Persian they killed was one less to threaten Greece. They fought not for victory, but for maximum destruction before their inevitable end. The Persians drove their soldiers forward with whips, forcing them to attack even as they watched their comrades die. The ground became slippery with blood. Bodies piled up. In the compressed space, the Spartans' superior training gave them a massive advantage. The Spartan spears broke from constant use. They drew their swords and kept fighting. When their swords broke, they fought with whatever they could grab: rocks, shields, their bare hands. The 700 Thespians fought beside them with equal courage. At some point during the desperate fighting, King Leonidas fell. The ancient sources disagree on how he died. Some say arrows, others say he was killed in close combat. What is certain is that when he fell, his Spartans fought savagely to protect his body. In Greek culture, leaving a warrior's body to the enemy was the ultimate dishonor. The Spartans formed a circle around their fallen king and defended his corpse with fanatical determination. 4 times the Persians tried to seize Leonidas's body. 4 times they were driven back. 2 of Xerxes' brothers were killed in this fighting. Then word came that the Immortals were approaching from the rear. The Greeks were now surrounded on all sides. The Spartans, what was left of them, pulled back to a small hill within the pass, carrying Leonidas's body with them. Here, they would make their final stand. The Persians surrounded the hill completely. After the horrific casualties they had suffered in close combat, they were not willing to charge the hill. Instead, they stood at a distance and unleashed volley after volley of arrows. Thousands of arrows arced through the air and fell upon the Greeks like deadly rain. The Spartans raised their shields, but they were exhausted, wounded, and outnumbered. One by one, they fell. According to tradition, the last Spartans fought until they literally had no weapons left, then fought with hands and teeth until they were overwhelmed. Whether this is literally true or poetic legend, it reflects how the Greeks remembered them, as men who never surrendered, never retreated, never showed fear. By midday, it was over. Every Spartan was dead. Every Thespian was dead. The Persians had their victory, but the cost was staggering. Somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 Persian casualties over 3 days, against a force that never numbered more than 7,000 Greeks. Xerxes, in his fury, ordered that Leonidas' body be found, beheaded, and his head displayed on a stake, a violation of Greek custom. This act of dishonor would backfire spectacularly. Instead of terrorizing the Greeks, it made Leonidas a martyr and inspired them to fight even harder. After Thermopylae, the Persian army continued south. They entered Athens and burned the city to the ground. It seemed like Greece was finished. But the time bought at Thermopylae was precious. Athens had been evacuated. Its entire population fled to safety. The Greek fleet had survived and was ready for battle. The Greek alliance, inspired by the sacrifice of the 300, was more united than ever. A month later, the Greek and Persian fleets met at Salamis. In a brilliant tactical move, the Athenian commander Themistocles lured the Persian fleet into narrow straits where their numbers meant nothing, just like Thermopylae. The Greek navy destroyed the Persian fleet. Without naval superiority, Xerxes couldn't supply his massive army. He was forced to return to Persia, leaving part of his army behind under General Mardonius. The following year, the fully mobilized Greek army met the Persians at Plataea. The Spartans, remembering Thermopylae and determined to avenge their king, led the charge. They crushed the Persian army in a devastating victory. Mardonius was killed, and the Persian invasion was over. Greece was saved, Western civilization was saved, and it all began with 300 Spartans who refused to retreat. The Greeks erected a simple memorial at Thermopylae with an inscription by the poet Simonides. "Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here obedient to their laws we lie." No boasting, no claims of glory, just a simple statement of duty done. The Battle of Thermopylae became a symbol that has echoed through 25 centuries. It proved that courage and sacrifice could stand against overwhelming odds. It showed that free men fighting for their homes were more formidable than subjects fighting for a distant king. The contrast was stark. The Greeks were free citizens fighting to protect their way of life. The Persians were subjects of an absolute monarch, driven forward with whips when they hesitated. The 300 showed the world that there are things worth dying for, and that sometimes the greatest victory comes not from winning, but from refusing to surrender. Their sacrifice saved democracy, philosophy, art, and science, everything that makes Western civilization what it is today. If Greece had fallen to Persia in 480 BC, the world would be unrecognizably different today. The legacy of Thermopylae is this: that numbers don't determine outcomes, that the quality of warriors matters more than quantity, that one person or 300 people standing for what is right can change the world. As long as humans value courage, honor, and freedom, we will remember the 300 Spartans who stood at the hot gates and refused to yield. Their battle cry, "Molon labe," come and take them, still echoes as a challenge to tyranny and a promise that there will always be those willing to stand firm in defense of freedom. This is why we remember. This is why the story matters. This is the legacy of the 300.